All right, let's talk about breakfast. For what feels like forever, we've been told it's the most important meal of the day, right? But is that actually true, or is it just something our parents used to say? Well, we're going to dig into some pretty fascinating new evidence that might just give us a clearer answer.
Seriously, this is the question, isn't it? Especially when you're rushing out the door in the morning. To figure it out, we're not just going to go with gut feelings. We're going to look at a huge new scientific review that's given us a lot to think about.
You know, the breakfast debate isn't new. People have strong feelings on both sides. But what is new is the sheer amount of data we now have to look at, which really changes the whole conversation.
So where's all this new info coming from? Well, it's from a major new study. And I'm not talking about some small experiment with a handful of people. This was a massive meta-analysis, which is basically a fancy way of saying that scientists gathered up a bunch of previous studies to look for the bigger picture.
And when I say massive, I mean it. Just look at that number. Researchers pulled together data from over 118,000 people across 9 different studies. A number that big? Yeah, that makes you sit up and pay attention to what they found.
So a meta-analysis, what is that, really? The best way to think about it is like a giant funnel. Researchers take all these individual studies, in this case observational ones, and they pour all that data into one giant pot. The goal is to see if a clearer, stronger pattern emerges than you could see from any single study alone. It gives us a much wider lens.
And through that wide lens, a really clear pattern did emerge. They found a significant link between skipping breakfast and a serious health issue called metabolic syndrome. So, what in the world is that, and why should you care?
So, metabolic syndrome isn't just one disease. It's a group of risk factors that tend to hang out together. And when they do, your risk for some really serious stuff like heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes goes way, way up.
So, what are these risk factors exactly? Well, here are the big 5. First, there's abdominal obesity, which is that extra weight around your middle. Then you've got high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, and finally, low levels of the good HDL cholesterol. To get diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, you need to have at least 3 of these 5 conditions.
Okay, so here it is, the main takeaway. After analyzing data from all those thousands of people, researchers found a clear connection. Folks who regularly skipped breakfast were significantly more likely to have this dangerous cluster of health problems.
Let's break that down a little bit. When the researchers looked closer at the individual risk factors, what did they see? Well, first up, they found a strong link to abdominal obesity, so skipping breakfast was associated with having more of that dangerous belly fat.
And the pattern didn't stop there. The next link they found was with high blood pressure, also known as hypertension. Again, the data showed that breakfast skippers had a higher risk.
And the third piece of the puzzle was a connection to high blood sugar. So you can see this trend, right? A link to 3 of the 5 key markers for metabolic syndrome. But like with any good science, we got to look at the fine print.
And this is absolutely crucial. You can't just look at the headline finding. The researchers themselves pointed out some really important limitations, and understanding these gives us the full picture.
Now this is a big one. The study made it very clear that what they were looking at, just randomly skipping breakfast, is totally different from intermittent fasting. Skipping a meal, often because you're rushed or unprepared, tends to go along with other unhealthy habits. Intermittent fasting, on the other hand, is usually a structured, intentional choice made by people who are already pretty health conscious. They're not the same thing.
And here is the golden rule of all observational research. You ready? Correlation does not equal causation. Just because 2 things are linked doesn't mean one causes the other. The classic example is that ice cream sales and shark attacks both go up in the summer, but eating ice cream doesn't cause shark attacks. In the same way, this study shows a link, but it can't prove that skipping breakfast is the direct cause of these health issues. It could just be that people with other unhealthy habits also happen to be the ones who skip breakfast.
And, to their credit, the authors were really upfront about a few other things. They mentioned there could be other variables they didn't account for, that the 9 different studies all measured things in slightly different ways, and that some of the data they worked with wasn't totally complete. It's just good science to admit this stuff.
So with all those caveats in mind, what do we do with this information? What's the real bottom line here? To figure that out, let's see what a couple of health experts had to say about the study.
Dr. Mir Ali's take really puts it in perspective. He says, yeah, eating breakfast can get your metabolism going and give you energy, but it's only one part of a much bigger health puzzle.
To really see a benefit, you have to look at your entire diet, your exercise habits, the whole shebang.
Now this, from Dr. Selena Rains, I think really gets to the heart of it. She suggests that maybe the problem isn't just about the act of skipping breakfast itself. Maybe it's about routine. Our bodies love rhythm and consistency, and when we constantly skip meals, we disrupt that natural harmony, and that could be what puts stress on our system.
So in the end, even though this study shows a pretty strong link, maybe the bigger message is about consistency and your overall lifestyle. It leaves us with a great question to think about for ourselves. Beyond just one meal, what does a truly healthy, harmonious start to the day really look like for you?